women did back in the 60s is they were teachers or nurses for the most part, or secretaries. And I thought I was going to be a teacher, and that's what I was really training for. But my dad was a lawyer, and my parents were divorced when I was 12, and I worked in his law office from the time I was 12 every summer and every Saturday. And he hired the first woman lawyer in Johnson County. Now, that didn't mean anything to me now. Now it does. I mean, but at the time, it didn't mean a thing to me that he hired. I mean, I knew that Gwen worked there and she had kids and she did real estate and she did divorce, whatever. But it was only years later that I realized how phenomenal it was that this four-member male firm hired a female lawyer. My senior year, I went in for my senior review with Dr. Eldo Bungie to check over if I had everything I needed to graduate. And I was an English major. I had already applied at KU and been accepted in their, it was a master's PhD program because I thought I might end up wanting to teach college English. And so I'd already been accepted. I was going to start there in the spring. And this was September, and he told me that he was not going to allow me to graduate because even though I had 134 hours and you only needed 124 to graduate, and I had the extra 28 I needed to teach, I was missing 1 hour in English. He would not count one of my courses I took in Copenhagen for my English major. And so I had to stay at Washburn to take one English course. I was so furious. I remember leaving that office saying, I am not giving this school one more penny of undergraduate tuition than I need to. I'm going to see if the law school would let me in. So I took the LSAT. I did well. I got my acceptance letter in December, and I started with the January class, and they let me in as an exception. I took 3 law school classes and 1 English class to graduate. What I really thought was I'm going to try it for a semester, and I didn't take away my thing. I kept my options open, and if I had not liked law school, I would have switched and gone into the master's PhD program. But I loved law school. It was home. It felt like home, and I'm sure it's because of the way my father thought and the lawyers I'd worked with, and it just made sense to me. Well, as a woman and being the only one in my class, the very first day of class, as I indicated, was a little intimidating because I didn't know what to expect. But when I walked in and saw 2 people that I knew, and there actually was one person that I had known in high school who was a year ahead of me, who had gone to KU undergrad, who was starting in January. And so as soon as I saw people I knew, I just sat down with them. And I got to know people really quickly, and it was not an issue. It just wasn't an issue. They accepted me immediately. And I know not all women at all law schools had that experience. But at Washburn, I did. I was one of the guys from day one, and that was fine. Two what I would call negative experiences. One was Professor Robinson, who the courtroom is named after. He was an older gentleman, very set in his ways, and I was enrolling for classes, and he came by and he said, "Young woman," and I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you enrolling in domestic relations?" And I said, "Well, I was thinking about it." He said, "Well, don't. Leave it to the men to have domestic relations with you." And I thought, okay, I can avoid this guy. I'm not taking him for anything, and I didn't. And so he never bothered me because I never took him for a class. The second was after first semester grades came out, the real semester for everybody, because the 36 of us only took, so many courses, and then we took the freshman courses. And so once we got to the freshman courses, we now have, there were over 100 and some students, so there were like 70 in each section. And Jim Arns was the torts teacher. I think he taught both sections of torts. He was notorious for giving D's, lots of D's. But remember, enrollment was more open then. Almost anybody could go to law school, but they flunked out 1 in 3 or 4. And so after the first semester grades came out, they used to post all the grades. You couldn't do this with the privacy rules today, but they used to post all the grades by numbers on the downstairs bulletin board, and whenever grades were done, they would be posted. And so you could, if you wanted to, start figuring out 114 got an A in this course and this course and this course, or you could kind of figure out what somebody's grades were. You might not know who it was, but when the torts grades came out, there were 3 A's and there were 24 D's and bunches of B's and C's, and we didn't have pluses and minuses then. It was straight A, straight B, straight C, straight D. That's all it was. And I had one of the guys who had returned from Vietnam come up to me and kind of get in my face. He said, "Did you get one of those A's?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I don't think women belong in law school, but if they're here, they damn well better be smart." I said, "Okay." I'm not sure how to take that, whether that's a compliment or a slam, but I'm going to just go on. But like I said, he and I were friends and peacefully coexisted. There may have been other people that felt that, but nobody else ever said it out loud. And so I felt very blessed. In fact, the Washburn's law students and guys were incredibly open. Washburn, and I think I put it in that article, but the Phi Alpha Delta chapter at Washburn took Martha Steinkamp, Peggy, and me in before nationals, and then Joe Zima and I think Gene Olander. It was when Alex Hotchkiss was the International Supreme Justice of Phi Alpha Delta, and they took it on the floor of the National to allow women into the male legal fraternity. So I mean, that's how forward our guys were. And then as soon as it passed national, they came back and we were officially initiated. So, and after the first semester, 2 of the faculty, it was John Howe and Bob Folks, asked me to be their research assistant. And I got the Nick Kosman Award for outstanding freshman grades. And so, law school went extremely well. I worked 3 jobs. I taught 9th grade English while I was going to law school in the afternoons, 2 hours a day. Graduation for me, the actual graduation was a little weird because I graduated in December and they didn't have graduation ceremonies back then. All we had was we had to wait until May. So I graduated in December. And so I studied for the bar, took the bar in February. I didn't even really apply for a job until after I passed the bar because I wasn't sure, you're a little leery as to what's going to happen. And I was the first group that took the multi-state bar examination. February of 1972, I believe, was the first year they gave that multi-state bar examination. In April. And the job I got was because of Randy Harrell, who used to be with the Judicial Council. He called me to help him out with an Explorer Scout post, and I said, well, I could probably do that, but I actually need a job. Do you know of any jobs up there? And he said, actually, we're going to be interviewing for one. So I went and interviewed, and Judge Alex Hotchkiss was in charge, and it was 2 guys and me. And they hired me, even though I told them I was going to be gone for 6 weeks with my husband going to Europe. And it worked, and I was the first woman in a research position up at the court. Peggy Gatewood was the first one who actually worked for a judge. But I was the first woman that was in the ranks. All the guys were in the room, and I was the only gal up there with the guys. So that was how I started. I worked with Judge Alex Hotchkiss, and my first project was a comparison of the ABA standards for criminal justice with Kansas statutes, cases, and procedure. And we came up with a big purple book that I've still got around here somewhere that was kind of very impressive and quite showy. My second project was a reorganization of the Kansas court system. I was the staff person assigned to that, and so I was the one working on the establishing a court of appeals, trying to combine all of the Court of Common Pleas, magistrate, and other judges into a unified court system, and changing, I think, the commissioners who were commissioners to the court became, I think they expanded the Supreme Court, so we had them on the court. And so that was a big job. And then my third job was writing a municipal court code and a municipal court manual. So I had a very busy 2 years while I was there. And after my first year and a half there, I got a phone call in May. No, it was early May, late April of 1973, asking me to teach debtor-creditor relations. Now, I'd never taken the course, but I said, sure, I'll teach it. You know, summer school, I can do it. And he said, well, I knew you taught, and he said, you were first in your class, I know you can do it. I loved working for the court. Part of the reason I loved working for the court is because the Judicial Council had committees, and the committees were lawyers from across the state. So I was getting to meet and talk with, like Ed Larson, who went ahead and went on to the court. People from all over the state were on these committees, and they were intelligent, they were articulate, they weren't just Washburn lawyers, they were from other law schools, and had other experiences and other backgrounds. Loved it. But I love lawyers. I told you that. I love lawyers. And so I thoroughly enjoyed the court stuff. In fact, I prefer that to doing private practice on my own. That's just me. I think the part of the determination of being a full-time professor is the lifestyle. And I have loved the lifestyle of being a professor. Now, some people think you don't work as hard. You work every bit as hard. In fact, John Keither, who used to be one of my favorite colleagues who died a few years back, John Keither and I used to say, if people could see us here on Saturday mornings or on, 5:30 or 6 some evenings, because it is often a 60-hour-a-week job if you're writing articles or if you're doing stuff, whatever. But yet you can take your summers off if you want to, just like in the others. You're always learning things. I've taught family law now since 1977, and it's a different course. We didn't have same-sex marriage in 1977. We didn't have same-sex parenting in 1977. Cohabitation, less than 500,000 people in the United States cohabited, now over 7.8 million. I mean, the world's changing, and family law is right at the center of that change. So it's exciting, it's stimulating, I can do what I want, I can develop my interests, and Washburn has been absolutely incredible. Part of the International Society of Family Law, I was an official observer to the Hague Convention that drafted international enforcement of child support and other forms of family maintenance. And one of the pictures I've got is the U.S. delegation with its observers, and I'm there as part of the U.S. delegation with the observers. And that was one of the highlights. To be in that room, which is like the United Nations. I mean, the Hague Convention on Private International Law, there were 100 some countries represented. You had earphones on, you were listening to things in French, Spanish, English. People from all over were presenting ideas. It was exciting, it was challenging, and the U.S. delegation invited us observers to all of their morning meetings. So we were able to go and to provide ideas, and one of my ideas made it into the report. So I was really, really pleased. But no, I was very excited about that. And I love the international work I've done. I've gone to several, like I said, I started Washburn's program, so I have a lot of international contacts. But the International Society of Family Law has taken me to a lot of interesting places and meeting a lot of interesting people. I've spoken at 2 World Congresses now. The 5th World Congress, I was a plenary speaker in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And then I spoke on 2 programs at the 6th World Congress in Australia. So it's exciting stuff, and it's exciting to be part of the think tanks of ideas going on around the world. So for me, that's exciting, obviously. I like writing about it. I like being there. I like doing it.
Wonderful.
I was very active in the American Bar Association Family Law section, and I was chair of the Family Law section in 2000, 2001. I think I was the 6th female chair of that section in its 40-year history or whatever. And I put together an international interdisciplinary think tank of 38 people to work on high conflict custody cases, changing the system for children. And so the thing I've been working for all my life is representation for children, a voice for children in custody and other cases, whether it's child in need of care or whatever. a voice for children in their parents' divorces, and a way to resolve conflict in a better manner. And I think that is my hope. That conference came out with a white paper. Everyone from that conference has gone on to do great things. One of them is a judge who set up a family court in Florida. Another set up a 3-state type of conflict resolution program. Another developed materials. 2 others have written books that I've got on my shelves about dealing with high conflict. So my hope for the system is that we come up with a better way to resolve conflict that doesn't harm the litigants and doesn't harm the litigants' children. Because I think that our society is suffering from the harm that's being caused to children. You look at the marriage rate, it's down. You look at the divorce rate, it's up. Many of these children are children of divorce. They're afraid to trust. Many of the children who are in the juvenile system are children that never had fathers, never had opportunities, never had support. The system has broken down and the trust has broken down. We have got to figure out a more humane way to provide access to justice for everybody and to handle conflict better.